All right, so we're here with our head football coach, Mr. James Colzie III, here to unpack his stories and learn a little bit about him. So, Coach, if you could take us back to the Florida days. From Florida, right?
Yes, sir. Miami, Florida.
What was it like growing up there?
Like I said, born and raised in Miami. Went to a private school my entire life until my last few years. My dad wanted me to go to a public school, face what he felt was going to be better competition. So, in a way, I kind of was out of my comfort zone. You know, I grew up with guys since I was 5 years old, and then having to leave them after grade 10 was a pretty big experience for me. You know, but going to a public school at the end of the day probably was the best case scenario for me because it made me, I guess, become maybe a bigger recruit to go play football and baseball at Florida State University. Because in reality, if I would have stayed at that private school, I might not have gotten the recognition that I got, you know, later on in my high school career. So, but you know, since the age of 5, I played all 3 sports, and then I didn't stop doing that until I got to college. You know, ended up playing football and baseball at Florida State, but my life was going from field to court to field from the age of 5 to the age of 18, and I loved it. And you know, that was just again something that, as a family, for my family, I had all those uncles and my dad. Those are all the things that, you know, if I would have done something else during that time, I would have thought something was wrong because that was just part of my life for the whole 13 or 14 years.
I've always wondered kind of what it's like. You said you had an uncle that played in the NFL and family. And so was that grind for sports, was that shaped through your parents, through your uncles?
Well, I mean, it was kind of like, I mean, I'm 8 years old and I'm going to go watch my uncle play for 10 big bucks, and it was just something that we just did every Sunday. You know, and if he was playing at home, it was a 3-hour drive to go watch him play against Walter Payton, go watch him play against, you know, just some of the guys that we see as legends now, but I used to see them play against him, you know, every Sunday. So it was just, my dad and my mom used to tell me they used to put balls in the cage in my crib at an early age, and you know, it was just kind of athletics has been in my family, and that's all. I felt that was all that we could do or were able to do. Myself, my 2 sisters, just you know, we weren't doing something athletically, then maybe one of us were sick or something like that. But that was our life.
So that's athletics has been a big part of your process, and I know, like you said, it's been a huge part of your routine, part of your habits, and that actually builds off of what we were talking with Bernique about in terms of finding routine and making it your own. So for us, where February is our month about building momentum,
Of course.
how have you found you've been able to build momentum, whether it's through athletics and obviously through the different transitional points in your life, shaping you from, you know, transitioning from baseball to basketball and football and things like that. There is adjustments as you face different adversity, and how do you stay committed, and how do you go about finding those routines to keep you fully invested?
Well, as I get older, you know, and realize some of the things that were put in place for me at a young age, even though that I was playing all those sports and going through right now, is just the structure. You know, having the ability to be able to structure everything that was going on in my life, and it just fit. It felt right. It seemed right. And you know, when things like that go on, I mean, obviously, if those things kind of fall into place, it's kind of like, well, the structure has allowed me when I was growing up, and now as a head football coach, it's one of the things I think I strive on is just making sure that everything is structured for you guys. And I think that once you guys kind of had to feel like everything was being done for a reason, but everything was an accountable thing, and I think that, you know, allows you guys to maybe, even though we do a lot of things, but I think the ability to, you guys feel that we are structured allows you guys to kind of pace your day and pace everything that you guys have to do, and makes it easier for you to do the things that I asked you guys to kind of do maybe on a daily basis.
Very true. So in the structure being a big part of your development as you were growing up, what was your biggest setback? What did you do when the structure, you know, collapsed? How did you handle all that?
I don't think I had any setbacks, to be completely honest with you, growing up. I mean, you know, it was always a good day to be on the field, or it was always a great day to, what I felt was get better. Probably the big setback that I had maybe was kind of later on in life. You know, I mean, as you go through all the success that you've had, and then maybe feel when you get to the NFL, you might not be as good as a Rondé Barber, or you might not be as good as a Donnie Abraham, and then you get released. You know, and you know, as a guy who was supposed to be like his uncle, who had played in the NFL for 10 to 12 years, and it was an All-Pro, and had the ability to go play in Pro Bowls, and then you're kind of supposed to be on that same path. And then, you know what, you get walked into the office and Coach Dungy says, you know what, Coach, maybe you're not, maybe, you know what, Colzie, you might not be as good as you thought. Because he didn't tell me that per se, but that's what I felt after the conversation. And then you're like sitting there, well, what's next? And, you know, in reality, it took me 12 hours to realize what was next. You know, I always felt that, you know, I might not have been the most athletic guy, but for some strange reason, I was a 2-year starter at Florida State, and a lot of it was because of the preparation that I had as a player, which ultimately led me to be a coach. And I was like, you know what, I'm done playing. What's next? Well, hell, if I can't play, coach. And so, you know, after kind of going through that 24-hour depression of not being the best defensive back to ever play NFL football, I realized that it was important for me to kind of put my efforts and my measures and start coaching. And I got an opportunity to coach at FIU. So my setback was a 24-hour period where I got cut from an NFL team. You know, but having the opportunity to go through a process like that and having the opportunity to be around some of the best players to ever play NFL football was a blessing. But at the time, you know, I didn't really see it that way.
So I think unpacking that, because that's huge, and I know that rings true in a lot of the conversations that we've had where people talk about facing adversity, and it is a window. It's a window where you have to let the emotion run its course, and whether it's 12 hours or 12 minutes or 12 weeks,
absolutely,
there's a time that it has to run its course. What I think what you're talking about is the ability to let it do that and get back on your feet. So talking about being resilient and things like that. So how do you stay committed? Obviously, you were projected and you were hoping and striving towards a goal, and where structure has always been so important. You did everything that you felt to the T, and then sometimes things don't go the way you thought.
Absolutely.
How do you go about staying committed and then making that next step so that 12 hours later you're ready to put your foot forward? It takes a lot of courage.
Well, I kind of had to put all things in perspective. You know, it was kind of like my mom and my dad are the two most important people in my life, but they put on the other side, like, well, James, nobody's going to feel sorry for you that you had an opportunity to go to play a starting corner at Florida State. You had the opportunity to spend time with an NFL team. So in reality, who's going to feel sorry for you? Who's going to feel sorry that you had an opportunity to get a free education? Who's going to be, so it's kind of like, well, I looked at it on the other side, it's like, you know what, I've had an amazing experience. And it was just a simple fact that, the ability to understand that I had to move on. And like I said, for me, I was all up in arms of what was going on in my life, but the other 99.9% of the world was not going to be upset that I had that opportunity. So that's how I looked at it. And that was my way of putting it into perspective. Like, you know what, you're not good. You might not be as good as those two people that you had mentioned earlier, but, you're probably a lot better than the other people. So in reality, this was a silver lining to me. I could have went on and had multiple injuries and then maybe led the life that I might not be able to lead right now because, the injuries and all that stuff that might have happened over an 8 or 9 year career. But, the writing was on the wall. It was time for me to do something else and not have a pity party for myself, but just really just understanding that, the time is over, which is no problem. That's part of it. And then having the ability to move on. It wasn't really a hard difference one way or the other. My mom and dad were the ones who kind of sat me down and really put it on me and said, look, nobody's going to feel bad for you. Just kind of figure out what's next for you.
Looking to, I guess, pick that apart for people that maybe don't know you as well and haven't been around you coming in and essentially reshaping the foundation and the culture here. When you're changing, whether it's something in your life or any change in general, I think there is the shakeup, whether it's the emotion and the reaction to that response, and then that the next step in taking that forward. My question to that is, do you try to look big picture, or do you really hone in on what's going on to take that next step? Because obviously being committed, you have to have the ability to look at both. So when you're working with a football team, obviously, the devil's in the details, so you have to have the specifics and the structure for everybody, but then you also have to look big picture. What are the guys looking for? What's lacking? What can we improve? And things about bringing stuff together. So whether it's personal or, on an organization, how do you go about staying committed in that transitional period?
Well, I think at the time, this initially coming in, I had to look at both, to be honest with you. Even though you look at the big picture, that means when you look at the big picture, you're going to have a lot, maybe some outside influences that you might not want. But it's important to look at that because in reality, this is a program, not just, it's St. Mary's University. It's not just here. St. Mary's, as I've gone out and recruited across the country, St. Mary's is a very, very big community. Guys all the way in BC, obviously from BC to here. It's kind of like, well, what are you guys missing? What do you think is lacking in the program? So part of that was some of the things that I had in place were, part of that. But in reality, the biggest thing was looking at things within myself. I was like, what, if I'm a player at this time, what do you think? What do I think those guys want? And it was important to, at times, get things from individual players on the team, get some things that might have been lacking. So big picture, kind of getting a feel on what maybe the outsiders thought what was lacking, but in reality, truly honing in on what the guys felt was lacking. And then going with that, and then also going within myself for what I thought if I was a player, what I would want if I was in this program.
Kind of shifting the conversation a little bit. I'm interested in your research and leadership, how you came about to do that, maybe from football experiences, maybe growing up, but that and maybe how that affects your guiding belief or things that you value in your day-to-day.
Well, when you're working on everybody's like, why are you working on your PhD? Why are you on so with your PhD? And I was like, well, for one, it was a competition. My family had a master's, so I had to outdo everybody. That was part of the reason why I started doing my PhD. And, so it was kind of like it's kind of like my sisters had their masters, my mom and dad, especially, in the 70s, they're receiving their masters when at that time that wasn't necessarily really not even an opportunity, let alone the ability to do it. So it was kind of like, well, we received my master's in 2007. My sisters during that time were kind of in the middle of doing their masters. Like we all had masters. And I was like, well, you know what? I got to outdo all these educated people in my family. And that was part of the reason why I started my PhD. And then as you kind of, when you get to that realm, it's more of a specialization of what you really want to do. Because when you have the opportunity to do your PhD, they allow you, there's like so many things, like they give you a million things to do, but we only want you to pick one. So it was kind of like, well, I'm a head coach. I wanted to be a head coach at that time. I was a coach, and daily I was meeting with guys. Daily, just talking to players. Daily dealing with administrators, and it was kind of like, well, I had one of my players say, Coach, I like the fact how you lead us. And I was like, well, for me, I'm not really necessarily leading you. I'm just kind of telling you what I think you guys should do. And he's like, Coach, in reality, you're leading us. And I was like, well, kind of think back and take a couple steps back. Like, you know what? Yeah, I guess I am leading this group. And that was kind of like, well, to me, it was kind of a full conclusion. Like, well, getting myself in a leadership opportunity, and now being a head coach, you're the face of a program or whatever the case may be, and then everybody's kind of looking at me on how our guys act or how our guys go about campus. And ultimately, I thought it was like, for me, if I'm going to be a head coach, the first and foremost thing I have to be is be a leader, someone that can lead by example and do the things that I want my guys to necessarily do in the future.
So, I guess keeping it on that personal track, in terms of the balance and being a leader. On one hand, you're leading a group of men in a completely new environment to yourself, and to creating a new environment here. On the other, you're a family man, and you kind of have that interesting dynamic and mix where it's you have your family here. Your wife's family's not, and your personal family's not even in the country. Right. So how do you maintain your focus, and how do you maintain that leadership or that passionate role in all of them? Because whether it's getting spread too thin or being away, there is a balance, and how do you go about finding that?
Well, for one, I always have to plan ahead. That's one thing. Secondly, take care of the task at hand. All right, you try to, you're a head coach and you have all these responsibilities you have to do, but if you don't take care of that one responsibility, it's going to affect the other 10 to 12 that you think you have to take care of. So in reality, when it's recruiting, that's kind of what I'm focused on when I'm doing my recruiting. When it's getting ready to get a practice schedule done, well, I make sure I get that done before I tackle anything else. If it's outside obligations, I know I have to take care of them, and I make sure that in reality, just take care of each thing one at a time. Because if you try to do 3 or 4 things, everything else gets shortened. So, in reality, obviously, my wife and my son, those are very, very important to me. And for me to be a head coach, I have to have an understanding wife, and she's extremely understanding. But when I'm home, I'm home. I don't necessarily take care of anything else except that. So, just making sure that I take care of everything single-handedly, or just making sure I do specifically just taking care of one task at a time is one of the best things. Because in the beginning, I was trying to do too many things, and it was affecting some of the other things that were going on in my life. So, for me, my focus would be just taking care of one thing at a time. And once you do it, put all your heart in it, and to get that done, get out the way, and then necessarily move on to the next.
What are, would you say, I don't want to say top three, but I guess top three values that you have in life that kind of lead your behavior as you go through?
For one, trust. I think that, I've been around some very, very good people. And anytime I've dealt with them or talked with them, the one thing we talk about is being able to trust whoever you work with or whoever's around you. Second, the ability to love. I mean, we're in this macho deal. But, as a head coach, if the players don't feel that you care about them, ain't going to do anything for you. And that's just in general. So I go with the trust, then so I go with the love. And I'm a high energy effort guy, and I would say that's probably my next thing. Just having, I feel that our team feel that I'm going to always have their back. I'm always going to put my maximum effort. I'm always going to have energy to show them that, hey, he's my leader. I got to act like him, or maybe necessarily not act like him, try to emulate him. And those are the three things: trust, the love, and just making sure that I'm always energetic. Not that nobody's ever going to see me down. It's a new day, it's a new hour, so whatever happened in the past, I'm going to move on and just make sure I'm putting my best foot forward at all times.
That, I guess, essentially the art of you being able to be in the moment is what it sounds like you're talking about, and be able to compartmentalize. So whether it's, one practice or, go from recruiting to the home life. What are some steps that you took to improve your ability to maybe compartmentalize? Because it's hard, and I think maybe it's a spectrum, because you can't always be fully in the moment, and other days some days will be better than others. But what are some of the steps that you take, whether it's day to day or overall, that you can work on?
Well, every morning I write down what I'm supposed to do. Things that I have to make sure I take care of that day. And believe it or not, sometimes I don't get through it. So if I write something down, I'm supposed to get it done that day, and then I don't, then that's actually whatever's left becomes the first thing the next day. I don't want to feel like I'm just talking out of both sides, but if I'm someone who's trying to learn how to compartmentalize and do all those things, try to tackle whatever you can handle. And then you'll realize it as you go how much you can handle. Some people can handle a lot, some people can't, but I'd always say try to do more as opposed to striving for less. But as you continue to go, you'll see what you can be able to handle. You'll understand what you can be able to handle. But take on as much as you can, and then scale back as you feel you need to.
Looking back, I know a lot of people always say they're grateful for all the experiences they had and all the lessons. But do you have any suggestions for your younger self?
Oh man, for me it would be listen more. You don't know everything. When people will talk to you, they're trying to help you. Majority of the time, and my younger 21, 22-year-old self be able to take criticism, and realize that at times criticism is not because you don't think somebody likes you. It's just when they stop giving you criticism and they stop trying to critique you,
I'm
that's
saying
when you should worry.
third. This is my voice.